And here we go. Donnie's day started with a smile on his face when he woke up. Must have been having a great dream, he thought. He got dressed and grabbed his backpack. His mom was about to head out the door when she said, "Good morning. You're looking awfully happy this morning. Something going on at school?" "Nah, just in a good mood, I guess." "Well, it's nice to see you looking happy for a change. I worry that I'm not here enough for you, Donnie. I miss you." Donnie said, "I don't really know why I'm in such a good mood, but I got a feeling things are going to get better for us, Mom, so don't worry. And I miss you too." His mom pulled him in for a quick squeeze and a kiss on the top of his head and said, "I love you so much. I gotta run." And she did. Out the door, down the steps, and across the yard to her car. Donnie put his lunch inside his backpack and smiled as he thought, not today, guys. Jack and D'Angelo, I want to show you guys some pictures. Jack and D'Angelo were at the bus stop. Donnie walked very slowly until he saw the bus come. He waited for them to get on, and then he hurried to get on and find a seat as far away from them as he could. See that? I know, Newman looks a little different, doesn't he? The publishers decided that their illustrations were, anyway, onward. Okay, so, another scene diverted, he thought. When they got off the bus, D'Angelo started giving some kid a hard time about the clothes he was wearing. So Donnie blended in with the other kids getting off the bus and remained invisible. Donnie glanced back and felt bad for that kid that D'Angelo was harassing and thought, I don't see what the big deal is. He looks fine. Now that he was through the door, hurrying down the hall, headed to his first class, when all of a sudden he felt like he just ran into a brick wall. He had just collided with a very large and muscular man carrying a janitor's uniform and keys, which were now sliding on the slippery floor. Donnie quickly ran to pick them up and hand them to the man as he embarrassingly apologized for his clumsiness. "Oh, no, it was totally my fault. Are you okay?" "Yeah, it's all good," Donnie said. "Well, that wasn't the best way to meet. Let's start over." As he put out his large hand, he said, "Hi, my name's Mr. Newman. What's yours?" "It's Donnie. Nice to meet you," he said as he shook hands with him. "Well, Donnie, I was just in with Principal Matthews getting my uniform for my new job as the school's janitor. I guess I was a little excited and not paying attention as I came out the door. Sorry about that," Donnie said. "Oh, that's okay. So you're the new janitor. Where did Mr. Crane go?" "I heard he decided to retire and move to Florida," Newman said, "to be with his daughter." Donnie said, "Oh, that's awesome. And you look like you can handle the guys that always give Mr. Crane a hard time. They used to pull pranks on him and say mean stuff to him all the time. He's a nice man. I'm glad he doesn't have to deal with them anymore." "Yeah, well, I wouldn't worry about those guys anymore. I haven't run across anybody yet that I couldn't handle." Newman laughed to himself, thinking, "You're the second person after Principal Matthews that I've ever even spoke to, so anyway." Donnie said, "Well, Mr. Newman, I gotta get to class. I guess I'll be seeing you around." "Yeah, Donnie, don't want to be late. It's nice to meet you. You have a blessed day." Donnie said, "Yeah, nice to meet you too." And then he turned and started down the hall, feeling like he just met a new friend and thinking, what a cool guy. Large, too. He was about to take a right at the end of the hall when he almost had his second crash of the day with none other than Bully Boy Jack himself along with D'Angelo and another kid they had never seen before. Jack almost instantly pushed Donnie up against the wall, and through his clenched teeth he said, "You better watch where you're going, twerp." Before Donnie even had time to form a fear-filled thought, Mr. Newman was there, standing over Jack with his giant arms folded. And he said to him in his calm, deep voice, "Jack, I believe you and your friends have a class to get to." With that, Jack quickly let go of Donnie, cleared his throat, and stuttered the words, Yes, we do." The other two boys backed up at the same time, turned and almost tripped over each other, trying to run away from the scene. Jack was now walking very quickly down the hall, looking back to get a full view of the very big guy that just about made him pee his pants a little. Donnie was still trying to take in what had just happened when he heard Mr. Newman say, "Oh, I'll see you later, Donnie," as he went bounding up the hall. Wait, what? Wait a minute. What just happened? Thoughts were racing through Donnie's head. How did he just do that? How did he get down the hall so fast? And how did he know Jack's name? Where did that uniform come from? And those sunglasses and that star-looking necklace? Donnie looked at the direction where Jack was, but he was gone already, and then he looked to where Mr. Newman was, and he was gone too. He just stood there, trying to figure it all out, when the first bell rang and made Donnie realize that he needed to get a move on or he was going to be late for class. Chapter 8. God had wasted no time at all turning him into Mr. Newman and getting his first day started on Earth. One minute he's standing on the moon, and the next he's walking through a door and running into another human, Donnie. Talk about thinking on your feet. He had no time or preparation for this sudden meeting with Donnie and the other boys. He thought things went pretty well. And having the power to be at one end of the hallway and then the other, no sooner he thought about where he wanted to be, he was there. And that was very cool. Newman liked the idea that he could go about his first day on Earth and know where to go and what to do and know how to do it. He knew people's names even before he met them, and even better, he knew how to pretend he didn't know them at all. Yep, so far, so very cool. Being empowered with knowledge and understanding is amazing, he thought. Everywhere he looked, he knew the name of what he was seeing and what its purpose was. He decided to take a walk around the school and check things out. He saw a lawnmower parked behind the school. Cutting grass, he thought. There was a small equipment shed there, and he looked inside. He saw a broom. Sweeping. He saw hedge trimmers. Trimming hedges. He saw a rake. Raking leaves. Everywhere he looked, he just knew. One part of the day, he spent looking at stuff, and now he started touching stuff. I love this one. He ran his hand over the skin of his very large bicep. He pinched the skin up, rolled it around between his fingers, and thought, smooth, soft, and a little rubbery. Us humans are a little rubbery. Then he put his hands on his face. And with the tips of his fingers, he started at his forehead and he worked his way around his whole face. Words like soft and smooth and hairy and stubble, they all came into his head, and now he was very fascinated and maybe a little bit obsessed with the textures of things. He felt the fabric of his brand new uniform pants, smooth. He felt the bumpy edges of his janitor's keys, sharp. And then he put his fingers through a pile of very thick black hair on top of his head and thought, soft and thick. Just then he felt something strange. His stomach rumbled. He thought, hungry. He found his way to the lunchroom where he was about to try a few more new textures with his mouth. This was going to be his very first taste of food, so he wanted to try everything. But the lunch lady started to look at him a little funny, so he only put a few things on his tray. Pudding, creamy, raw carrots, crunchy. Sloppy Joes, greasy and very sloppy. Milk, cold and creamy. Jell-O, bouncy and jiggly and a little rubbery in my mouth. He took more bites of the red Jell-O, and he kept pushing it through his clenched teeth with his tongue until it was watery in his mouth. Well, until he did it too hard and it squirted out of his mouth and onto his tray. Whoops, he said. Good thing he was eating alone in the teacher's lounge and nobody saw him. Newman thought, I like Jell-O the best. That's a fun food. Then another thought came into his head. Grown-ups don't usually play with their food. He looked up and he said, okay. After he had had enough to eat, he wandered back outside, and that's where he found one of his favorite textures of the day, soft green grass. He kept running his hands back and forth through the short green blades on the football field, and then he found a brown patch. He ran his hand over it and decided that the green grass was much better. Then, more touching. He picked up a dandelion and he stuck it in the stem through his buttonhole on his shirt. And as he reached down to pick up a football that was left on the field, two words popped into his head at the same time. He immediately thought the proper name for this is a football, but sometimes it's referred to as a pigskin. Ask Dad. It is. He felt the slightly rough, nubby texture of the ball in his hand, and then he decided to see if God had empowered him with the ability to actually throw this thing. His stance looked like a professional football player as he threw the ball. He watched it go up and up and up, and then it finally came down and landed on the roof of the school, which was about 350 yards away. He looked around, and thankfully he didn't see anybody watching him. Lucked out again, he thought. He noticed his chest was thumping, and he noticed that, and so he touched it, and he realized that his heart was pounding at the thought of someone seeing what he did. Nervous, he thought. Then he quickly but humbly thought, better get to know my own strength. Then Newman went back to touching stuff. He made his way over to the bleachers and sat down on the cold aluminum platform. He ran his hand across the top. It felt gritty. Then he touched the underneath of the bleacher and felt lumpy and bumpy. He wanted to see what the lumps and bumps looked like, so he bent over to look at what he was feeling. And once he saw the wads of chewing gum, he jerked his hand back and said, "Oh, gross!" And then, with a little less enthusiasm for touching stuff, he wiped his hands on his thighs of his pants and looked up at the sky and said right out loud, "Thank you for such a beautiful day, Lord." He didn't hear God like before, but he felt God say, "You're welcome, Newman." Newman decided he'd touch some more stuff later. For now, he just wanted to sit in the grass and run his hand through his favorite texture, feel the warm sun on his face, and wait for his little friend, Donnie. Chapter 9, last one. Donnie tried really hard to pay attention to the teacher, but his mind kept going back to that morning's incident with Mr. Newman. He kept replaying the whole scene in his head like a little movie. Each time he would try to justify the things he saw Mr. Newman do, but he just couldn't. He was sure of one thing, though. Math class was different today. Donnie and Jack had 2 different classes together. He was thankful math was the only class that he shared with Jack as well as D'Angelo. Jack sat two rows up and 2 over from Donnie, and D'Angelo's was 2 over from Jack. So Donnie was able to keep an eye on both of them. Usually Jack would be throwing small objects back and forth, and D'Angelo would be egging him on, but today both of them were sitting quietly. It even looked as though Jack was paying attention. D'Angelo, not so much, but he was still acting like him. He wasn't acting like himself at all. As Donnie looked at Jack, he couldn't help but feel a little sad for him. Since his dad came back into his life, he seemed to be such a different person. It's funny how we allow other people to make us act differently. I guess we have to impress them or be what we think they want us to be. Anyway, as Donnie looked at Jack, he felt sad for him, and since his dad came back to his life, he seemed different. He never used to act up or say mean or rude things, and he was never disrespectful to the teacher like he was last week when she put his graded test on his desk. He saw a grade that was a D. He crumpled it up and told the teacher he hated this class anyway. She told him to stop mouthing off or he would get sent to the office. He slumped down in his chair, folded his arms, and said, whatever. Of course, this drew a little snicker and a thumbs up from D'Angelo. Donnie just didn't get why D'Angelo thought Jack's behavior was so cool. Well, none of that was going on today, which made Donnie think to himself, it sure would be nice if that little run-in with Mr. Newman was all it took to put an abrupt end to all their bad behavior. and it sure would make my life simpler. The fifth period bell rang, and all the kids piled into the hallway, heading to their first class. When Donnie looked down the hall to see Mr. Newman coming his way, they traded hellos as they got closer, and Donnie couldn't help but notice how snug Mr. Newman's uniform was on him. "Looks like you need a super large," Donnie said. Yeah, Mr. Newman laughed a little and said, "Yeah, we're working on it." As he turned to walk with Donnie, he asked, "Hey, how's your day been? Any more problems with Jack?" Donnie said no, and then he looked around to make sure nobody was paying attention to them, and he quietly said, "What exactly happened this morning? How did you get from down the hall to where I was with Jack so quick?" Before even letting him answer the first question, he was about to ask another when Mr. Newman said, "How about you meet me at the bleachers after school today, and I'll fill you in on some things." Without even thinking about it, Donnie said, "Okay, I'll see you after school." A quick "see you later" from the both of them, and they went their separate ways. If it were anybody else who had asked him to meet them after school, Donnie would have done a mental safety check of the situation and at least factored in that he couldn't be late getting home or his mom would be worried. But for some strange reason, Donnie just knew somehow that this was okay, and he really needed to hear what Mr. Newman had to say. Donnie couldn't wait for his last class to be over. He couldn't wait to hear what Mr. Newman was going to say. How could he possibly explain how he did those things this morning, he thought. That's the end of chapter 9, and I will turn this one off and instantly read chapter 10.